Before I talk some more about politics, because I know that everybody loves that, I want to tell you a baseball story. And those of you in the audience who are baseball fans, please bear with me. I'm sure you know this story already, but I'm going somewhere with this. So, one of the greatest hitters in the history of the game was Ted Williams. And one of the things that made Ted Williams such a great hitter, aside from his natural athletic gift, which he certainly had, was what a serious student of the game he was. He conducted scientific studies of hitting, of bat speed, of bat weight. He would study films of other hitters and other pitchers and see what they were doing right and what they were doing wrong. And he was just probably the most intelligent athlete regarding his sport and how he approached his sport that there had ever been up to his time, and perhaps even to this day. If there was a flaw in Williams's hitting game, it was that he was a predictable, very consistent pull hitter. He was a left-hander, which means that he batted from the right-hand side of the plate, and he would very often pull his hits to the right side of the field. He would hit down the first base side. In 1946, actually in between games of a doubleheader against the Red Sox, Williams's team, the shortstop slash manager of the Cleveland Indians, Lou Boudreau, came up with a defense for Williams. What he did was he shifted his infield over to the right. He had his third baseman play basically in the shortstop position. He had his shortstop shift over to essentially the second baseman's position. The second baseman shifted over further toward first base and backed up a bit into shallow right field. His first baseman hugged the baseline, and he was backed up by the right fielder who came in just a little from right field. And it worked. It actually worked well enough that we now call it the Boudreau shift. And it worked so well that later in 1946, that fall, the manager of the St. Louis Cardinals used the Boudreau shift in the World Series. And the Cardinals won that World Series against the Red Sox, and Williams finished the series with 1 RBI. Keep the Boudreau shift in mind, because now we're going to talk about politics. Thus far in his presidency, Barack Obama has taken a lot of flack, not just from his critics on the right, but also from his supporters on the left. He's been criticized for not being liberal enough, for being too centrist, for worrying too much about what the Republicans think and trying too hard to solicit help and agreement and compromise with the Republicans. He is not the first Democrat by far to have employed this strategy for government. Bill Clinton did the same thing during his presidency. Back then it was called triangulation, and I suppose it still is, but I don't hear that word too often. Triangulation basically means that the politician in question, and we'll just say a liberal Democrat like Clinton or like Barack Obama, will intentionally adopt some of the policies of his opposition in order to sort of neuter the opposition and to govern more as a centrist as opposed to, in this case, a liberal. With Clinton, it worked very well because Clinton would still keep his liberal left-wing base happy, and he would also appear to be reasonable to a lot of the independents and the people on the right by adopting certain Republican policies. Obama has attempted to do that and has largely failed because the Republicans have implemented their own version of the Boudreau shift. The Republicans have anticipated Obama's attempt at triangulation, his attempts to sort of pull to the right, by shifting even further to the right. So when Obama, like in the recent debt ceiling crisis, tries to shift to the right by saying, okay, you know what, I'll agree with you that tax hikes on the wealthiest Americans are off the table, and cuts in entitlements and perhaps even in Medicare and Social Security are on the table. Very, very Republican positions. The Republicans merely said, instead of going, okay, thanks for seeing it our way, now let's work out what those cuts will be, instead of doing that, the Republicans said, yeah, well, you know what, That's where we were maybe 10 years ago. We're way over here now. And if you want to work with us, you're going to have to come up with a lot more cuts, and you're going to have to promise that you're never even going to try to raise taxes on the wealthy ever again. Because of the Boudreau shift, Obama's attempt at triangulation has largely failed. It's pissed off a lot of his liberal supporters, and it has failed to win him any support among the right. He still has some independents on his side, because independents can go either way. He hasn't really entirely pissed off independents, but he hasn't gained any favor on the right at all, because the people in Congress that he has been attempting to work with through this attempt at triangulation are not interested in working with him. They have shifted so far over to the right that even if Obama comes over this far to the right, they're still way over there outside the frame. You can't even see them. They're so far to the right. Now, part of the lesson of the Boudreau shift, as far as Ted Williams goes, is that Williams was partially to blame for its success. Williams was a gifted hitter, but he was also an incredibly stubborn and proud man. It was obvious from the first time that the Indians implemented the Boudreau shift what they were doing. There was no secret. As soon as Williams came up to bat, everybody shifted to the right. Williams could have altered his batting stance, shortened his swing, waited for a pitch that he could punch to the left as opposed to pull to the right, but he didn't. He insisted on sticking with his favorite strategy and continued to try to pull the ball to the right, even though the chances of getting a hit over there on the right had been seriously diminished by the use of the Boudreau shift. If Williams had not been such a proud man, or such a blind man, or such a stubborn man, however which way you want to phrase it, he may have been able to mitigate the damage that the Boudreau shift did when he came up to bat. If Barack Obama is less stubborn, is less proud, is more flexible than Ted Williams was, he may be able to counteract this version of the Boudreau shift that the Republicans have implemented against him. Turning to the right, pulling to the right, is a waste of time for President Obama. Not because that is inherently a bad idea for a left-wing president to do. It's always good to seek out compromise. It's always good to make sure that the other side knows that your office door is always open. But these people aren't interested in making a deal. They're not interested in compromising. They're interested in getting him out every time he comes up to the plate. He needs to aim up the center and to the left. If he does that, then I think we can count on a second Obama presidency. That, and that he has that going for him, and also the fact that the guys on the Republican team, the starting lineup, even though they have a really harsh, really tough as nails strategy, Obama is just a better player. But in order to beat them at this game, he has to alter his strategy, and he has to play to his strengths and play to his base and beat them. He can't play their game. He has to make them play his game. And that's something he hasn't tried yet, and I really hope, as a guy who voted for him last time, and a guy who, for the few big disappointments of the first term, is still planning on actually looking forward to voting for him this time. I would much rather see a slightly diminished Barack Obama with a second term than a Mitt Romney or Rick Perry or anybody else on that other side. Because the truth is, they're doing the Boudreau shift because that's all they've got.